What's up, y'all? Gonna film your first digital lesson here. I'm finishing my pint of ice cream like a big heifer for dessert. And we'll start here. I tried to get it to work so you can see my face down here while I presented. I did it on another thing, but I don't know what's up with it. So try as I might, I give up. So let's just go ahead and get it going here. Alright, so I'll start the presentation here. My face is gone, but I'm still here. Let me get this out of here too. All right, so you did a web quest on Heredity there the last 2 days. Hopefully you found some good stuff in there. Heredity is an awesome topic because it's how you get all your genes from your parents and how any other organism gets all their things from their parent to the offspring. So you can see over here on the right, this is a DNA strand, a huge thing to deal with it. So on we go. First, what is heredity? Heredity is the passing of genetic material from parent or parents to offspring. It just depends on what kind of reproduction we're looking at. There's many ways this can happen. First, we talked about this before we went on break. Sexual reproduction is how most animals and some plants reproduce, and it's when an egg cell is met with a sperm cell and it creates a new zygote, or those are also called gametes, sometimes instead of egg and sperm, but they meet and they cause a new organism to form. Also, another way is asexual reproduction. This A in front, I want to get my laser pointer. This A in front of sexual means without it. So this is without sex that happens, but it only takes one organism. That should be one, not on. Budding is when something grows out of it. Spores is when spores fall out of the bottom of it, like of a plant, like a fern. Fission is when it splits in two, like bacteria, and vegetative reproduction is when a plant kind of grows off another little plant, and cloning. So those are without sex, and those are all ways that genetic material gets passed from parent to an offspring. So a couple pictures. This one obviously is sexual reproduction. There's a sperm cell into an egg cell. And this is binary fission. This is, I forget what this thing is. Some kind of paramecium is what this is. It's splitting into two identical things. So it's actually the same DNA when it splits into two. And this is an example of vegetative reproduction. So this is how strawberries and lots of other plants grow runners. So it's the same DNA because it comes from this plant, but it shoots off and it shoots off and it shoots off and it grows up and it's the original DNA from the original. So that's passing genetic material to the offspring from the parent. This guy right here, this handsome devil, his name is Gregor Mendel. He's the father of genetics and the father of heredity. That's what he's known as. But he did the first major experimentation with heredity, and this was in the 1800s, the 19th century, and he was a monk, so like a priest kind of thing. So he spent most of his time kind of just looking at plants. And he studied the pea plant first, and the pea plant was a good one because it had really cut and dry genes that popped up. And he looked at 7 different characteristics to see how the parents would pass those traits on to the offspring. And each characteristic he studied had 2 different forms. They'd get one from mom and one from dad, and he called these different forms traits. Get out of there, thing. Traits. And the 7 traits that he looked at in the pea plant are right here on this table. So seed shape, and it was either round or wrinkled. Seed color, it could have been yellow or green. Color of the pod, green or yellow. Shape of the pod, full or constricted. Height of the plant, tall or short. Position of the flowers at the leaves or at the tips. And then the color of the flower that it produced, purple or white. So you could get one of these traits from the mom and one of the dad, and whatever combination happened is what showed up. So when Mendel bred the pea plants together, he observed that some of the traits would always pop up and show up no matter what he did. And these were called dominant traits. Some of the traits would disappear sometimes, and if they disappeared, he called them recessive. So think about what those 2 words mean. If you look at this picture, dominant is like stronger or bigger. It blocks out, it's a larger letter when we talk about that later. It blocks out the recessive trait, and this guy's getting whooped on but the A is dominant. The big A is dominant, the little a is recessive, the bigger is dominant, the little is recessive. Okay, so dominant traits would block out or cover up recessive traits. And this is called a Punnett square. So let's say he had a yellow plant, it would have a big dominant uppercase Y, and the little y, or a big Y, but in this case it's a little y, it blocks it out and made it yellow. This one has two recessive Ys, which are green, stand for green, and there's no dominant to block it out, so that becomes green. So you put one down there, one here, and that makes big Y, little y. And because that again has a dominant trait, blocks out the green, makes it yellow. This one straight down green from this side, big yellow. Dominant Y blocks out the little y, yellow. Straight down, straight across, little y, recessive means boom, it's green. There's no big Y dominant to block it out. Same thing here. So that's kind of how it works. Okay. So how do these traits get their info delivered to the new organisms? How do the traits get passed on from the parents to the offspring? It's through the DNA. If you've never heard of DNA before, it's a big old long word. Okay, but this is what it looks like. It's a twisted ladder. It's a double helix. That's the shape of it. DNA's role. Every organism has a set of these instructions in its cells. Every one of your cells has this in it. Okay? DNA stands for this big old long word, deoxyribonucleic acid. And the DNA determines what traits you get from your mom and your dad, or the parent cat, or the female cat, male cat, female iguana, male iguana, it doesn't matter. These traits that Mendel found are also called genes. So he knew there were traits, but they end up being called genes on a DNA strand. Remember, you get half of the gene from your mom and one from your dad, half and half. So 23 chromosomes in a human from a mom, in an egg cell, 23 chromosomes full of genes from your dad in a sperm cell. Whatever gene, or also called alleles, you get is a different variation of the gene. So think about the different genes you could have. You have tons of different genes. Maybe you have blue eyes, green eyes, curly hair, wavy hair, earlobes attached. You can roll your tongue. You can taste certain things. You can smell certain things. You're tall, you're short. Those are all different variations, different alleles of different genes. This is an example of it. So say this is a gene you got from a dad. This is a gene you got from your mom. This, or chromosome you got from a mom. Dad, chromosome you got from a mom. And this is the actual gene on this part of the chromosome. And then you say it's an allele for purple flowers, the genes for color of flower. This allele is purple, this allele is white. So those are kind of how the words actually fill out. Let's see if we are understanding this. We're going to watch this real quick. So here we go. I'll shut up for a minute. I know you can't believe that.
These days, scientists know how you inherit characteristics from your parents. They're able to calculate probabilities of having a specific trait or getting a genetic disease according to the information they have from the parents and the family history. But how is this possible? To understand how traits pass from one living being to its descendants, we need to go back in time to the 19th century and a man named Gregor Mendel. Mendel was an Austrian monk and biologist who loved to work with plants. By breeding the pea plants he was growing in the monastery's garden, he discovered the principles that rule heredity. In one of the most classic examples, Mendel combined a purebred yellow-seeded plant with a purebred green-seeded plant, and he got only yellow seeds. He called the yellow color trait the dominant one, because it was expressed in all the new seeds. Then he let the new yellow-seeded hybrid plants self-fertilize, and in this second generation he got both yellow and green seeds, which meant that the green trait had been hidden by the dominant yellow. He called this hidden trait the recessive trait. From those results, Mendel inferred that each trait depends on a pair of factors, one of them coming from the mother and the other from the father. Now we know that these factors are called alleles and represent the different variations of a gene. Depending on which type of allele Mendel found in each seed, we can have what we call a homozygous pea, where both alleles are identical, and what we call a heterozygous pea, when the two alleles are different. This combination of alleles is known as genotype, and its result, being yellow or green, is called phenotype. To clearly visualize how alleles are distributed amongst descendants, we can use a diagram called the Punnett square. You just place the different alleles on both axes, and then you figure out the possible combinations. Let's look at Mendel's peas, for example. Let's write the dominant yellow allele as an uppercase Y. and the recessive green allele as a lowercase y. The uppercase y always overpowers his lowercase friend, so the only time you get green babies is if you have two lowercase y's. In Mendel's first generation, the yellow homozygous P mom will give each P kid a yellow dominant allele, and the green homozygous P dad will give a green recessive allele. So all the P kids will be yellow heterozygous. Then, in the second generation, where the two heterozygous kids marry, their babies could have any of the three possible genotypes, showing the two possible phenotypes in a 3-to-1 proportion. But even peas have a lot of characteristics. For example, besides being yellow or green, peas may be round or wrinkled. So we could have all these possible combinations: round yellow peas, round green peas, wrinkled yellow peas, and wrinkled green peas. To calculate the proportions for each genotype and phenotype, we can use a Punnett square too. Of course, this will make it a little more complex. And lots of things are more complicated than peas, like, say, people. These days, scientists know a lot more about genetics and heredity, and there are many other ways in which some characteristics are inherited. But it all started with Mendel and his peas.
Okay, we'll do some big Punnett squares later. Hopefully you're kind of getting it. There was a couple things we didn't talk about on that video, so let's check those out. So one was phenotype and the word genotype. They're kind of either one or the other when you talk about it. So phenotype starts with a pH. It's what the gene physically pH shows up like. So if we look over to the right, the phenotype, this would be a pink bird, red bird, blue bird. That's what they physically look like, right? Okay, so that's their phenotype. Genotype is what allele or letter combination of the gene there is. So you could be big A, big A, big A, little a, little a, little a, big A, little y, big Y, little y, whatever the letter combination is. So if you look over here, out of this, what's its genotype? Big A, big A. What's the genotype? Big A, little a. What's the genotype? Little a, little a. Okay, genes is letter combination. Phenotype is what they look like. Second thing they talked about was homozygous and heterozygous. We've talked about this 1,000 times. If you have the prefix homo, it means same. So homozygous letter combination is big, big, little, little. They're the same. Okay, hetero is different. So here, the only different combination they have was big A, little a. So this one would be a heterozygous combination. This is homozygous dominant because they're both the same big. This is homozygous recessive because they're both the same little. Hope that makes sense. We're almost done, I think. So how the heck did that happen? Here's some weird things that can happen when they breed. Sometimes two traits will combine differently. The two things are called incomplete dominance and codominance. In incomplete dominance, neither of the two traits is dominant over the other, so it results in the combination of the two. Okay, kind of like a mix. So this would be a good example. Excuse me. So a red flower mixes with a white flower. In the case of incomplete dominance, red's not dominant, white's not dominant. They can't decide. So what do? Boom, they mix. So red and white would mix and complete a pink flower. Instead of big R, you think it should be red, but no, it's incomplete, so it mixes. Codominance, they're both dominant, so they both show up. Okay, they can't decide. So this would be like a red cow mixed with a white cow, and you get a red and white mixed cow. They both show up. It's co. Just like if you do a co-op in a video game or cooperation, you do it together. They kind of both show up. So those are some weird things that can happen sometimes. So sometimes one gene can change everything. Okay, just one gene. And in the case of this beautiful, beautiful tiger here, hope you're watching Tiger King, this thing is controlled by one gene in the tiger. It's gene SLC45A2 in the tiger's DNA. And if it's different, it can change the tiger's fur from orange to white. Sometimes many genes affect what a physical characteristic looks like, and eye color is one of them. Your eyes, whatever color you have, can be controlled as many as 16 genes. That's why we all have so many different eye combinations. Okay, it could be brown, could be hazel, could be green, could be blue, could be really dark brown, could be different shades of different things. This is called heterochromia. That's a disorder, different colors, but so lots of different genes. Sometimes genes don't even play a factor in it. Okay, and that's this. It says some genes are affected by the environment, like this Arctic fox here. Depending on the weather, the Arctic fox's fur will change to match it. So that is all the different fur colors of the fox depending on the environmental temperature. Last slide. So, acquired versus learned is what this says. All the traits we talked about here so far are acquired through inheritance from your parents. So, things you got from DNA transferred from an egg and a sperm or through asexual reproduction, what else? Or something, whatever. Learned traits are things like speaking a different language. You don't inherit that. If you guys were born in Russia, you guys would be speaking Russian. It's not an acquired trait. Learning to read and write. You could be born under a bridge in like a caveman and you never learn to read and write. So that's something that you learned. One thing I always like to say, The Rock or somebody who's super jacked up like this, he's ripped. But it does not equal that he's going to have ripped kids as soon as they come out of your body. Okay? That's not happening. This is acquired and really weird. So hopefully this is making good sense. We'll get a talk session where we talk about stuff. Use this to fill out the questionnaire that I have, the form, and that'll be due today. You can work on this tomorrow and Friday. All right, miss you guys. See ya.